So last week we discussed the physiological and anthropological evidence for what the perfect starting point for the optimal human diet is. We got clear on why there is no such thing as one optimal diet that fits everybody, but that we can only talk about the perfect starting point for all human beings. So what becomes evident to us is that the optimal human diet, the starting point that we should all embark on when figuring out our own individualized perfect diet, is really very simple. It's about optimizing energy metabolism, because energy lies at the base of our health in general. And then of course it's about meeting those nutritional requirements, trace mineral requirements that we do require as human beings. So I want to get into today the really basic building blocks for starting out your diet. So if you're ready, brother, let's dive into it. And as always, I'll be happy to hear your comments and questions in the comment section below, so that we can continue this discussion and exploration about how we can optimize our diet outside of this video format. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell if you want to be notified when new content comes out, new cool information to get you to truly master your health, wealth, and happiness. Okay, so to continue from where we left off, we know that simple sugars are the superior source of carbohydrates for energy metabolism. We know that fats are what we need for hormonal production and hormonal balance, and we want to seek out saturated fats preferred to polyunsaturated fats, and then we need proteins for structural purposes. Simple sugars are of course found in fruits, honey, and dairy. This is where we find the simple sugars. Saturated fats of course comes from ruminant animals, and then we can also get it from coconut oil or coconut butter. I wouldn't base my saturated fat intake on any kind of oil, meaning a liquid fat, because it still has a very high polyunsaturated content, which is why it stays liquid in room temperature. So the only fats I would seek out are fats that are stable in room temperature, such as coconut oil and animal fats. And of course we want to get our proteins from animals, right? Because animal protein has a complete amino acid profile, which is not found in beans and legumes. And then we also avoid all of these defense chemicals that are found in the legumes and the beans. So definitely get your proteins from animal sources. So now this is what we should base our diet on. This is what our digestive system, our energy metabolism works the best on. Now we also have survival foods, second grade foods that human beings have treasured in times of famine or when the hunting season hasn't been good. These are grains and root veggies. Why, you might ask? And for that I would say go back and watch last week's video. What is the optimal human diet for, or this is the optimal human diet for the human being. There I discuss the physiological and the anthropological findings, or the evidence that supports the fact that these are second grade food, and the foods I mentioned before are the primary staples of the human diet. You find the link right up in the corner. Go check that out and then come back to this video. So simple sugars and starches can both be used for effective energy metabolism. Now there are several issues with starches, which is why we prefer simple sugars. The starches are often, they always come with defense chemicals, right? So that's the first obstacle we have to come around. Secondly, they are avid feeders of the gut microbiome, which we don't want an overpopulated microbiome. And every time we feed it, we also have to deal with the waste products of the digestion of these bacteria. And now the third part of it is that these starches often are very irritable to our digestive tract. You know this when you, for example, eat commercial bread, or when you eat potatoes that haven't been cooked thoroughly. You can get like kind of hard in your stomach, you can get gassy, burpy, or even just have stomach pain. That's a sign of indigestion, and that's because these starches are not easily digested by the human digestive tract. So let's see how we make these starches easily digestible, because a lot of us do like to have the occasional potato or the occasional bread, right? So first we must focus on removing the defense chemicals, the plant defense chemicals. So to properly remove the plant defense chemicals, we in the case of rice, remove the shell, so we are left with white rice compared to, for example, brown rice that still has the shell on them. In the case of rye and wheat and these grains, we make sourdough out of them, because there the plant defense chemicals are found within the seed, within the grain itself. Something like gliadin and gluten, for example. Now, in the case of root veggies, because these vegetables are hidden under the ground, they really only have to focus on defending themselves against insects, right? So you find all of the defense chemicals in the skin, which is why you always want to peel your roots, right? Our grandmother always did this. Simply no household in the 20th century or in the 1800s ate roots that were not peeled. This is a very new idea that we have gotten, that defense chemicals somehow are very nutritious for us. An idea that probably comes from the homeostasis theory, which I will be happy to make another video on. Let me know if you want to hear about that. Now, when we have peeled our roots and tubers, we have removed the most defense chemicals that we can possibly remove. Now, the next thing we want to do is that we want to pre-digest the starches so that it's easy on our digestive system. We get rid of all those irritabilities, and we can actually make the nutrients within the starches bioavailable to our body. That means cooking your roots for at least 40 minutes with an adequate amount of fat. So first off, cooking them, make sure that you break down the starches so that the starches are easily accessible for your body to use and to convert into bioavailable energy. And also it releases the nutrients and makes them again more bioavailable for your body. That means that your body needs to use less energy on assimilating, consuming and using these nutrients and this starch as bioavailable energy. Also, of course, it makes sure that the starches don't end up down in your colon as feed, massive feed for your gut bacteria, which can produce something like a SIBO condition, right? Where you have overpopulated the gut with bacteria, and the bacteria have started to move from the colon into the small intestine, and that can cause a lot of issues, because now all the food that is digested in your small intestine is also being food for the gut bacteria. So you have a chronic overproduction of endotoxin, which leads to the next point. If you get the starches, if you don't cook them properly and too much starch ends up in your colon, you get an overproduction of endotoxins. Endotoxins like lipopolysaccharide, a notorious endotoxin. It can go out into your blood, it can go up and cross the blood-brain barrier, giving you fatigue, mentally sluggishness. It can even manifest such as obesity. Many mice studies supports this fact. And of course, with the adequate fat, the fat helps your body digesting the nutrients and the starches. So by cooking with adequate amount of fats, again helps your body release and use all the nutrients and the starches in the small intestine before it moves down into the colon and becomes feed for the gut bacteria. Alright, so that's the first part. Avoid defense chemicals, use simple sugars or treated, properly cooked starches as your carbohydrate source, right? Simple sugars from fruits, ripe fruits, of course. If those cause you issues, you can remove the skin. Again, that's where the most defense chemicals are, but that shouldn't be an issue when eating fruits for most of us, because we don't have such sensitive guts. But if it is an issue for you, try to remove the skin, and of course don't eat the seeds, right? Contains many toxins that we just shouldn't be consuming. Alright, so now we have our carbohydrate sources, right? And we know that we eat carbohydrates for energy. Now let's talk about the fats that we consume for optimal hormonal balance and production. We want to get our fats from saturated fatty sources, not polyunsaturated fats. You might be wondering, what am I talking about? Should we drop the heart healthy oils? There is no such thing as polyunsaturated fats being heart healthy oils. Let's get into that. First off, cholesterol is a vital nutrient in our physiology. Many studies supports the fact that low cholesterol, if you chemically induce low cholesterol in patients, for example, it produces a lot of psychological and neurological ill effects in these patients. Low cholesterol is definitely not a state you want to be in, right? We need cholesterol as a defensive and structural component in our physiology and immunological response system. And of course, the issue of seeing patients with high cholesterol numbers when they have an underlying illness such as heart disease or any other disease state is a natural reaction of the immune system to that underlying condition, being it a heart disease or any other disease state, right? So you should see cholesterol as a structural component that is needed when our immune system tries to repair broken tissue, right? It's quite like that you need a ladder for fixing the roof, and that you need a scaffold for fixing a bridge. We need the structural component of cholesterol to transport and build up and regenerate broken down tissue. That's why we see such high numbers of cholesterol in people that have bigger underlying issues that they need to solve. So we shouldn't, don't fire the fireman when the house is burning. That's kind of the idea here. You don't want to fire the employee that comes and tells you that, your numbers are bad and that you need to do something about your business. You should listen to him, and then you should respond to what he's saying. As well, we should look at why we have high cholesterol, look at what underlying conditions there might be, and then fix that underlying condition. Cholesterol is not the issue. Cholesterol is actually a vitally important nutrient. It is actually so important that we can manufacture cholesterol out of simple sugars if it is that we don't get cholesterol from our diet. So that's not to say that you shouldn't focus on getting saturated fats with high amounts of cholesterol in it, because of course converting sugars into cholesterol is a very energy intense practice. It's much better to get this vitally important nutrient from your food, from saturated fats. Now, of course, there are many other reasons to base your fat intake on saturated fats and completely cutting out the seed oils, the vegetable oils, all of these dominant polyunsaturated fats. If you want to hear more on that, then let me know in the comments, and I'll gladly lay out my research on why it is that saturated fats are superior to polyunsaturated fats. So ruminant animals are simply the best source of saturated fats, like suet, tallow, butter. These are your best choices of saturated fats, and that's of course because the ruminant animals has this special ability to turn PUFAs into saturated fats, which makes sure that the fat that we get from ruminant animals has a very low amount of these volatile and dangerous PUFAs. Now, the only plant fat that I would rely on would be coconut butter, right? This is, again, coconut is a fruit, so it doesn't have so many defense chemicals. It's not a nut butter, okay? And again, it is stable under room temperature, which means that it is a saturated fat. It doesn't have a very high polyunsaturated content. Lastly, why I suggest that you get your protein from animal sources is of course because of the complete amino acid profile, and specifically from ruminating animals is because ruminating animals generally are the least toxic animals. Also, they play a vitally important role for regenerating the soil and improving the environment. That's right, again, contrary to what you have been taught by politicians and popular belief, ruminating animals are extremely important and necessary for regenerating the soil and the environment, right? A cow is a fertilizer, a natural fertilizer from end to other, from mouth to anus. Out of the anus comes beautiful manure. Out of the mouth comes saliva with a lot of enzymes that helps the soil and the bacteria in the soil give beautiful nutrients to the plants. Again, the methane is not an issue, right? It takes 10 years for it to turn into CO2 in the atmosphere. The CO2 is again used in oxygenation by the plants. I would love to make another video on this. There's a lot of topics we need to talk about. Again, remember to hit subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll get the notification when these videos come out. I base the vast majority of my meat consumption, my protein intake, from cows and horses. These are simply the most nutritious, cleanest and cheapest sources of protein, right? It's a win-win-win situation. Now, of course, you should get your ruminating animals, your cows, your horses, from regenerative practices, grass-fed, grass-finished, organic farming, right? That goes without saying. Now, pigs, fish, and poultry all face the issue of a devastated environment and unsustainable farming practices, right? They are fed species inappropriate diets with grains and soy, which gives them a high PUFA content in their fat, gives them parasite, fungal infections, and all sorts of diseases. And if you eat diseased animals, you wish disease for yourself, right? That's an old traditional Chinese saying, and how true can it be? I sometimes will eat free-range pig and poultry if I know the source, if I trust it, and if I crave it, but mainly I will base my diet, my protein intake, on ruminating animals such as cows and horses. Alright, that's all for now, brothers. I truly enjoy laying out the research, giving you the knowledge that I have used to fix myself. I know how weakness feels, I know how illness feels, I know how it feels to be fatigued all the time, and I wish nothing else for you that you return to your thriving health, that you attain the true self-mastery of the body, which will give you the ability to master your mind, to know what you want in life, to set your life straight and become the man that you wish to be. Remember to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell so that you can be notified when you get the new content that I provide. And if you are stuck in your journey or you don't know exactly how to implement these things that I'm teaching you, then please reach out and I'll be happy to help you get over your roadblocks and return to thriving health and true self-mastery. That's all for now, guys. Love and chi.